Hello, this is Art Talk, and I'm Rona Rutchik, your host today. Art choices is my focus this season, and I'd like to talk with you about art choices today from the point of view of the artist. You know, you and I, as audience, have a lot of choices we can make. We can look at abstract art or photography or realism or super big sculpture. We can look and we can like from a big variety of things. For an artist, they have the same kind of choices, but it's very different. Choice is made by the very act of creating, and from the very primary moment of making the decisions of what to use for a subject, how to get that subject onto either a canvas or into a piece of stone, what kind of techniques a certain media needs. And we're going to talk to an artist and see what kind of choices she has. I'd like you to meet Judi Hostetter from Chattanooga, Tennessee, who's been living in New London this year as a recipient of a Griffis Art Center residency award. She has won, along with two others, from a large application pool of over 60 international artists. And she's come to New London for the academic year to full-time paint. She's a professional painter, has a studio in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and has works in private collections, both corporate and non-corporate, all over the country, and is represented by artists in a half a dozen states. I'd like you to meet Judi Hostetter, and we're going to talk to her about her residency and the kind of work that she paints. Hi, Judi.
Hi, Rona.
Thanks for coming to the studio.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
What was it like when you got the phone call or the letter that said that your application was not only accepted and you not only made the top group, but that you were chosen to come to New London for an academic year and have a private studio and be able to paint full-time?
I couldn't believe it.
What did your
It was
family
a dream
say?
come true. My husband thought 9 months was an awfully long time, but he was really proud of the fact that I was able to do it.
And he's come to visit?
Yes, he brought me up and built my big easel and that we'll see later on, and the big canvases, stretched those for me, and then went back home to work.
And wait and hear how you managed
yes,
alone in New England.
Right, I've sent him photographs of everything I've done, and a few photographs along the way of New England as I've seen it with my camera.
Now, speaking of New England and as you've seen it, we're going to talk about how, and for an artist, the choices are made by your eyes and by your imagination. And of course, with the techniques that you've learned, it has a lot to do with learning. What did you see first when you came here? The differences between Tennessee and New England, or the similarities?
Oh no, the differences.
Immediately.
They're striking.
What did you like to use for the differences in your subject?
Well, the architecture is unique in New England, much, much different than our homes. We have Victorian homes, but we also have a lot of long, low homes, the rancher style. So these large, high homes with the intricate tops really intrigue me. I've enjoyed painting those, and of course the sea. I love the sea. Love being near the water. I love everything that goes on near the water, and I spend a lot of time there, just observing and storing up memories and creating paintings.
So you were taken with the differences really between where you're used to, the scenery that you're used to, and the kind of look that you found when you came here.
Yes, very, very much. The light is also different here.
Oh,
Yes.
and so were you able to in any way change your techniques to collect the light that you could see, or color, your palette?
Yes, quite possibly. I'm using the same palette. I use a full color palette, so I really haven't changed my palette, but I am incorporating more light into my work.
Well, we're going to visit your studio now and take a look at the kind of work that you've been doing, and we'll talk about it in just a few moments. Let's go to Judi's studio at the Griffis Art Center now.
I would like to tell you about the red boat painting. My first day in New London, I was trying to find the art center, and I stopped on Pequot Avenue. It was the only address I had. I stopped on Pequot Avenue and went to a little restaurant. I think now I've learned it's called Fred Shanty, and asked for directions to this particular address on Pequot Avenue. And the gentleman there told me to go down the ramp to the dock, and there would be a telephone booth there, and I could make my phone calls. So when I went down the ramp to the telephone booth, I saw this beautiful red boat in the water with wonderful reflections, and determined I wanted to paint that. So I made my phone call and raced back up to the car, grabbed my camera, and came down and took a photograph of it, several photographs of it, so that I could paint it later. I love the reflections from the water to the red in the boat, and the boat back into the water. I also like the boats that were behind the red boat. They rather framed it. I like that very much. And after I had been here a while, I've done some touring. I took a trip up to Point Judith and discovered these marvelous fishing boats, and loved the way they looked, the reflections, their reflections in the water. This is a totally different scene from what I normally live with in Tennessee, so I'm just fascinated by all of the boat activity. This particular boat I liked very much because of where it was docked, because of the seagulls that were flying around it. I just liked everything about it. And then these two small pieces, the top boat has another tiny little story that goes along with it. My husband was putting together an easel for me and some other related studio equipment after he got here, and he had to get some screws, so we asked where we could go to a lumber yard. He also needed a little bit of lumber, so someone directed us to Minor and Alexander, and I spotted some boats over to my left at that hardware store, so I told my husband, you go ahead and do the purchasing. I'm going to look at these boats. And I spotted this little red and blue boat in a little channel there between the Crocker Boat Yard and the hardware store, and I liked it very much, so I painted it. And then the one below is another scene that I particularly liked at Point Judith. And I think that's all I really have to say about these boat paintings. Now we're seeing one of my works in progress. It's a 6-foot by 8-foot oil painting of the marshes. And I've combined some scenery that I saw in Maine and also Groton Long Point. I've rather combined the two things to make this one large painting. I've done some mural painting, so I wanted to try some canvases on a large scale since I had such a lovely large studio to work in while I've been here in New London. And now maybe we can take a look at my actual studio. I've really enjoyed this large studio space, a lot of wall space. It's given me a lot of freedom to move around as I work. Sometimes an artist works in a studio that's quite small, and other times they have large studios. This is by far the largest studio I have probably worked in, and I've really enjoyed it. I have enjoyed the stone walls that I found in New England. That's something totally different for me. We have cows in Tennessee, and they look quite similar to your New England cows, but we don't have the stone walls that you have here. So I've enjoyed creating some paintings that reflected both things. I've also worked a little bit with some acrylic gouache while I've been here, which is a water medium. It's a very interesting medium, and it's from Italy. I like it very much. I think I'll probably continue to use it in the future. I've done about 5 paintings in that medium since I've been here. Also, I have enjoyed the fall season here in New England. We have beautiful fall seasons in Tennessee as well, but I believe yours far surpassed our falls. I've painted several paintings reflecting this. One of these are these wonderful maple leaves that I found at a home in Old Lyme. I really love the brilliance of the colors and enjoyed creating this canvas. And the one beside it is of a big tree in Capri Land's herb farm. We were able to go and tour that herb farm, and it was a wonderful experience. I loved the colors. It was an early fall day. I loved the colors that day and the hugeness of the tree. And so I created this particular painting. Some of the other paintings reflect various parts of New England. Now perhaps we'll go to the drawing board and I'll do some watercolor painting. It's a medium that I love.
Well, Judi, from looking at those wonderful pieces, I can see that, number one, you're not into abstraction. You like to look at things, and your eye and your imagination allows you to get a specific view of just about anything in your location.
Right.
You go to, obviously, flower markets and just walk the beach and look at the view. And I could see that wonderful boat down at Burr's Dock in New London. That was your first stop.
Yes.
And you, as an artist, put a frame around a certain look out of your eye.
Right. I have really trained my eyes now so that I can pretty well pick out a composition just by looking at a scene or a building or whatever. I have a little bit of a different slant on some of the subject matter that I paint than most artists do. For example, I love to paint the tops of these Victorian homes here rather than the entire home. It's the tops that intrigue me so much.
Is that so?
The top 2 floors. So I've really enjoyed that kind of a view.
And I noticed that with trees, you very often are underneath them.
Yes. Yes, I enjoy doing that. And seeing the skeleton of the tree and then how it blossoms or blooms or how the leaves come out or just whatever. It's
and very close up on flowers.
Yes.
You're very interested in the intricacies of the flower, how it actually explodes from the inside out.
That's exactly right.
Well, it's wonderful to see that. Now, I've also noticed in looking at your work, there's very often a little photograph attached to the side. Do you use a camera to decide what you're going to extract from a vision?
Yes, I paint from photographs and from memory. I used to paint from life entirely, and then I began a business about 10 years ago, a gallery and a studio combination, and it was open 6 days a week, and I did not have the time to go out on location as much as I had in the past, 1 day a week, and that depended upon the weather and what else was going on in my life. So I had no choice but to resort to a camera. I took a workshop from a very well-known artist, and he said, just buy yourself a camera. Take it everywhere you go. Then you'll have your memory and your photographs.
So instead of sitting down and setting up your easel in a place and spending all that time from beginning to at least halfway, you'll take your camera and take more than one shot of an area and then see what you're going to use for a frame up of getting up on close or...
Right. Many times I'll use 10 or 12 photographs to compose one painting. And sometimes they'll be from totally different scenes. That I'll pluck a tree out of this one and something else out of another photograph and put them all together in a composition. I like doing that.
Now, with all of these different subjects that we've seen flowers and we've seen nature, we've seen that wonderful cow. Is a cow something new for you up here in New England, or do you have cows in Chattanooga? I've never been to Tennessee.
No, we have a lot of cows
in
Tennessee. However, we don't have this lovely rock walls you have here. And I love that combination of the antiquity and the cows. I love
the
that.
young curiosity of the cow. That was wonderful, the one where the cow was looking over the rock formation. Did that really happen? Was that really?
Yes, that really happened. I was on my way to Watch Hill, and I discovered this wonderful farm with all of these cows behind these rock walls. So I stopped and did a few little quick sketches, and this little bull was so curious about what I was doing. And came right over to talk to me almost.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So I took
Here in New
picture.
England, we think cows belong only to us. Of course, it's true there are cows in other parts of the country, but cows have really been taken over as an icon for New England. And you're going to love taking that cow or a cow like that cow home to remember your New England life,
yes.
I think. Now, we've noticed that there's also a number of media that you choose. When you decide on a subject, you have a number of techniques at your fingertips that you can use. And we're going to talk after we look at a public service announcement in a few minutes. What kind of media you can choose. We've looked at some oils and acrylics so far, and we will look at more watercolors later on and talk about media. But for now, we're going to stop and look at a public service announcement, and we'll be back in just a moment.
art is a process that fills our lives. See it, enjoy it. This public service announcement is brought to you by the Griffis Art Center, New London, Connecticut.
We're back at Art Talk, and Judi Hostetter is my guest today. We're looking at art choices from her point of view as a painter and as a resident artist at the Griffis Art Center in New London. Judi, we saw some of your work earlier, and we saw that you worked in oil and acrylics and watercolors. And is this a way that do you combine, or do you make a distinction between them having to do with subject matter?
Yes, I determine that when I select a composition.
So from the very beginning, part of your imagination and part of your eyes make a decision not only on a subject matter and a framing of a subject matter, but let's see, will it look thick and oily, or will it look thin and watercolory?
I visualize it.
You visualize
in the medium.
Uh-huh. And but there's no set rule that the houses will be in oil and the fields will be in watercolor? Or
No.
you make that decision for each piece as you go along?
That's right. And I also determine in oil or watercolor, either one, the size.
Oh, from the beginning?
Right.
How you're going to work the size?
I don't worry about standard sizes. I stretch the canvas to suit my needs.
Ah. Well, let's take another look at your studio and see if we can get a good look at the watercolors and also how you do it. Let's take a look now at your studio.
I thought I'd show you how I do my watercolors. This is a watercolor that I already have in progress. It's a scene in Maine, fishing boats in Maine. And it's one I'd put aside to come back to later. This seems as good a time as any. So I guess this is later. You might notice that I'm working from a photograph I tend to do that a great deal. I take my own photographs. Occasionally I will paint something from a photo someone has given me and has allowed me to use, but for the most part I take all of my own photographic references. And it's not uncommon for me to take about a dozen photographs and put together a composition. I don't necessarily use it for the color, but I do use it for placing my elements in the composition. You'll notice I'm working on boats again. I think I mentioned before that I was fascinated by the boats here. We have boats in Tennessee that are on our lakes, but they are speed boats. And I think they go so fast I probably couldn't even photograph them, let alone paint them. So I've enjoyed these fishing boats here in New England. One of the first things a watercolorist needs to learn is the ratio of water to the paint. Seems to be, as a teacher, that's one of the things I find my students have the most difficulty with. They either don't add enough water or they have water everywhere. And since I usually paint wet on dry paper rather than wet and wet, they have to learn to control their quantity of water. Another lovely thing about watercolor is if you choose to crop the painting, you can do that when it's finished. If you decide you want to leave something out, you can crop it with a mat, or you can actually tear off a portion of it and change the whole size. I love that about watercolor. I don't do it often. I usually make all of those decisions before I begin the painting, but occasionally I do. Unlike an oil, you can't do that with an oil. I use a pretty full color palette. I like color. I like a lot of color. I'm not afraid of color. So I use a lot of colors when I'm creating a particular piece. Occasionally I will make a very low-key painting with just a few colors, but for the most part I use quite a few colors. I was talking a bit earlier about the the acrylic gouache medium that I've come across, and I really like it very much. I first read about it in a book by Stephen Quiller, and decided to try the medium for myself, and I really liked it. So I'll have to do some more of those paintings. This particular scene was taken, the photographic reference was taken at Cape Porpoise, Maine, and I was watching a lobster fisherman coming in to unload his wares, and even got to see the lobsters when he pulled them off. I was standing on the dock, and about 2 minutes after I snapped this photograph, he ended up at the dock with his lobster. You may have noticed I have quite a few brushes. I use all of them eventually. have favorites, but I also I even have a few oil brushes I use at times with my watercolor, especially when I'm scrubbing out an error or wanting to make a change. It's nothing like an old worn-out oil painting brush. Of course, as with any painting, once you get to a certain point, you need to stand back and look at it to determine where you want to go next with it. So I never paint too long without doing that, even with watercolor.
We've seen so many wonderful pictures, and now media that includes the watercolor, this acrylic wash, and oils. Do you ever mix acrylics and oils and waters together?
No, I really don't. I do
like
the acrylic gouache and watercolor, but not oil.
Mm-hmm. There's so much equipment too. We took a look and saw all of those brushes so neatly stacked in cans and all the colors of your palette. When you make your decisions, do you go from brush to brush, and is that a difficult thing for an artist to do?
Well, I think most artists have a few favorite brushes they use over and over until they wear out. That's a collection of 30 years of brushes, so I have a number. I have a problem throwing a brush away.
Well, one of the things I noticed that I love the way you do is you seem to have a very large range of tonalities. Even in the picture we were watching you paint, the watercolor, you're painting with wet watercolor on a dry page, right?
That's right.
And you're able to get everything from an almost clear transparency to a tone that's very full. How do you do that?
It's just practice and learning how to control the medium, actually. I do a lot of glazing.
What does that mean?
It's layering color upon color.
And it doesn't muddy?
No, as long as you layer each succeeding layer upon a dry layer.
Oh, a dry layer.
Yes.
So you wait for it to dry.
That's exactly right. Or I blow it dry with a hairdryer.
Oh, so the technique of a hairdryer comes into place. That's wonderful. And that's a very new, well, not immediately new, but certainly our generation. Nobody earlier than our generation had hairdryers to take into an artist studio.
No, they just waited it out.
Waited it out, and maybe didn't wait long enough occasionally, and the muddiness would come in more often than in your case.
Right.
So you can dry it and then put another layer on it and get it to be richer in color if that's what you want.
That's exactly right.
Now I notice you don't really paint with a white color. How do you deal with the light? You have so much light coming into your paintings. Even this painting that we have on our table, which was one that we saw on the wall of cabbages, has so much light coming out of it. Do you use a lot of white paint on your palette?
I rarely use white paint. I probably used white paint in 2 paintings, perhaps, in all these years of painting in watercolor. I save the white of the paper. To me, it's a game. It's part of the challenge of the medium.
So your imagination runs so deeply that you are already planning, when you're filling up your paper, what negative space you're going to make into positive space.
That's exactly right.
And you don't find that a difficult thing to keep in mind?
No.
Do you ever make a mistake and need to erase?
Oh, of course.
How do you do that?
Or just scrub it out. I take a little oil painting brush, a little oil bristle brush that's very tiny, bristles are very short, and scrub it out.
Scrub it out is really the word you use?
Well, that's the word I use.
Yeah?
That's the word I was taught.
And you can brush it out?
Yes.
You don't just cover it with like whiteout or anything?
No. I use,
there's a real
just use
technique
water,
to this.
just dip it in water and just scrub it out. I use good paper. I use Arches paper, handmade paper from France. and I use 300-pound weight. That allows me to scrub out when I need to. I try to pre-plan my painting, so there's very little correcting needs to be done, very little scrubbing out. But
and yet when we saw that painting you were working on, it didn't look to me, or my eye anyway, that you had sketched it first and that you're painting over a sketch. Do you not do it that way?
No, I do sketch on watercolor.
You do sketch
Paper, yes,
before
very lightly with pencil.
So
yes.
you have your arrangement
right.
organized.
Right, I do that. I have to do that. I feel I have to do that in painting realistically, and being able to save the white of the paper in the areas where I need the lightest light. Otherwise, I probably would get lost. Just my little roadmap.
Is this sense of organization that I seem to get from looking at your neat studio and watching the way you do things a part of the teacher in you?
Yes, I think so.
I think so, too.
It's part of my makeup.
And you run, at home, you run workshops, and so you want people to get an organized way of doing things. That's very important to a watercolorist.
Well, I think it really is. If you're going to save the white of the paper, it has to be clean. So you have to be organized to a certain point, to a certain degree, in order for that paper to remain fresh and viable. And so there's a certain amount of organization that needs to go into painting with watercolor as opposed to painting in oil.
I see. Well, each medium has its own characteristics, and that's a very important choice that you make as an artist, using your eyes, your imagination, and the techniques that you've learned. Learning has a great deal to do with it.
Yes.
And I think that to talk to an artist about the work that they do is, for a viewer, an audience of art, very important. I think we can see better when we know more about what you think about when you make a picture, a scene. We're talking to Judi Hostetter, an artist in residence at the Griffis Art Center this year. She has won from a list of over 60 international artists who have come to New London, who wanted to come to New London. 3 of them have spent an academic year privately painting in a studio in New London. We're glad that you came to our studio to talk to us. We wish you lots of good luck.
Thank you.
The paintings are all beautiful.
Thank you.
And we hope you come back and visit Art Talk again and get another point of view of the art that artists make.